April 26 minutes.
I'd move that we approve the April 26 minutes as presented.
I second it.
Now, is there any discussion? If not, we can get this with a voice vote, right, Sheila? And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. This is the time at the meeting where we have a general public comment on items that aren't on the agenda. Hopefully you've scanned the agenda. If there's items that we'll be discussing later, it'd be more appropriate to deal with them then. But at this point, does anybody have any comment on non-agenda items? And if so, please come up, state your name, and tell us what you have on your mind.
I'm just going for an agenda.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if this is the time or not, but I needed to ask you a couple questions about
Okay,
some
would you
public
state your
hunting.
name, just
Mike
so-
Whitfield,
Okay. And where are you from?
right here,
All right.
locally. Anyway, down in Neosho, the wildlife area, is there any public maps down there that shows where we can hunt at? There is?
Yes.
Okay, I need to know that.
I'm getting a head nod from somebody that does know.
Well, it's been a while, but I hunted down there. I'm going to go back again. But there's a part over there on South Unit. Is anybody familiar with that, the South Unit? Okay, I guess it wasn't flooded this year. Okay. Across the river where you can wade across it, because I've waded across before, Wildlife and Parks used to own some property over there. They still own that? That's open for public hunting?
I would have to ask somebody in the staff, I'm not sure about that.
Is there a way we can find out?
Yes, sir, we'll find out for you.
Who would I contact, or would they contact me?
I think we're going to find out for
We'll
you
go
here
find
real
out in
quick.
just a second, I think.
We do have some land on the other side of the river, but I'm not sure exactly where you're talking about, but
Okay. This is just a quick sketch of me. That's the South Unit. That's north, of course. There's Neosho. And there's an area right here for public hunting at one time. That's the open.
if it is public hunting, yes, it is open.
Well, it's not marked. There's no boundary marks there anymore, because I was down there, but there used to be boundary marks. Now, is wildlife still on that?
If we owned it before, we still own it.
There's no boundary mark on it now. But
Okay.
is there a way we can find out? I can find out if that's still open?
Yeah.
We
Okay.
can check that for you and find out, and if it
Great,
needs,
that
if
would
it
be-
needs marked, we can mark it.
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
And let me see. I think I might have one more to bore you with. Nope, that's it. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else have public comment on anything that's not on the agenda?
Brad, do you want to get with him and get his contact information? That way you could, okay, great, thanks. We're looking at each other.
Well, there being nobody else, I think maybe we can get started. The department report, I'm going to have a statewide conservation award, but before we get there, this is going to be Commissioner Meyer's last meeting, and Commissioner Meyer has been extremely helpful and has been this has been helpful for 8 years. You were here when I got here.
Yep.
We were talking beforehand that I got a letter that was written in longhand that we don't see that much these days. Of course, that's still Frank and my preferred way of doing things. And he's been very helpful, very insightful, and has done a lot both for Wildlife and Parks as the role of commissioner, as well as a lot of other statewide things that he's done on his own free time. And we appreciate it. As a modest token of our appreciation, we have a plaque, and it has something that's been hanging down in Pratt, and a picture suitable for framing, they used to say.
Who's going to keep the rats away down there now?
Yeah, well, they have my picture and some of these other commissioners.
Oh, okay, that'll do.
Anyway, hey, thank you.
Let me get this where they can see it.
There you go.
I got proof.
All right.
Camera, 1, 2, and 3. Good, thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you.
That is a pretty good picture, too.
Not bad. I look younger than those.
Well, it's all right.
I was, wasn't I?
Well, kind of. All right, but we're still going to get a good day's work out of you today. So, statewide Habitat Conservation Award, Jake George. How do you spell that? M-U-R-G-I-A.
You think?
Each year, our private lands wildlife biologists work with many landowners across the state of Kansas to provide them technical assistance in developing wildlife habitat on their private lands. These landowners do this willingly and as a way of thanking a landowner each year that our biologists think exemplify the spirit of the wildlife habitat improvement. They're once a year able to nominate a landowner of their choosing. This year, Dave Weber is to be presented with the Wildlife Habitat Conservation Award. Randy Whitaker is the nominating biologist, and I will bring Randy up here. He's going to give you guys a little PowerPoint with some background on Dave, and then we're going to be presenting Dave with the plaque and this beautiful print you see up here.
For us to see the PowerPoint, we're going to have to go that way.
Yeah. I want to see 4 seats, so we better.
Yeah, I'll stand
Oh,
up.
okay.
Well, I assure you, even though this is intended to be a short program, it will be worth your effort. I had the opportunity to work with Dave, or start working with him probably in the early mid-90s. And it's been a lot of fun, a project in the making, and you get to make periodic visits, see what he's been getting done, and it's been quite a transformation. Could we have the first slide? I have. It would be the State Habitat Award. When I started with the department, it was all overhead projectors and transparencies, and they worked good. Okay, that would be the first one. If you just go to slide mode. Okay. Anyway, reducing the lights. Okay, by aerial photography standards, this is what Dave's property looks like. And actually, you can see very well, that's the Missouri River on the right-hand side of the slide. Dave's property is outlined in red there, but it's about 160 acres. It's about 3 miles south downstream of Wathena, Kansas. But the aerial photos don't really do the whole thing justice. Go to the next slide, please. This is Dave's backyard. This is the upstream view from his property. and you begin to get a feel for what how scenic really the Luss Hills and Missouri River Bluffs can be. That is part of the property. You look straight north up the upper part of the slide there, you see the property to the north, and you notice you don't see very much. There's a lot more down over the hill there. So that's how rugged the ground is. Next slide, please. This is a downstream view. You got the river there in the right-hand side of the slide. You begin to, and that's Missouri in the background. That's the other side of the bluffs, the Missouri bluffs that you're seeing there. And there's quite a drop in topography there. Next slide, please. That was also taken from his backyard. There's about 60 acres of woodland, with the remaining acreage being in just a little under 100 acres of CRP. His management activities include prescribed burning on a rotational basis, food plots and fire breaks. They both function well together like that. I mean, one substitutes for the other. Shrub plot establishment and management, TSI work, edge feathering, maintenance of brood and pollinator habitat. Go to the next slide. And the result is quite a mosaic of textbook quail habitat. And keep in mind, this all was farmed. This was all row crop prior to 1993. But a number of other species have benefited other than game species. He doesn't just restrict it to game stuff. And of course, anytime you manage for any game species, you're going to pick up on that as well. But Dave understands what he's doing when he does quail habitat management as well. So if we have the next slide, please. This is an example of some of the brood habitat that he has. Next slide. This actually is a result, the weed population you see here is a result of a fire break to protect a shrub plot, but it also doubles in as a brood strip, mostly weeds. Next slide, please. Everything's textbook, like I said. Shrub plots, this was, I believe, planted in 2009, right next to a fire break / food plot, and then surrounded by the native grass. And this is all CRP, by the way. Next slide, please. He also makes sure to attend to the quail and turkey. This is a legume food plot. He likes to experiment, so he's tried quite a variety of legumes, both clover and alfalfa. Next, please. Every 2 to 3 years, he cuts out his woody draws. Back when I first started working with Dave, most of that draw looked like the timber in the background, or pretty close to it. So every 2 to 3 years, he cuts that back. Next. That is the bluffs there to the upper left. I wouldn't even begin to guess the drop in relief there, but this is a small bottom field. The Missouri River is just 50 yards to the right there. I believe it's about a 10-acre field that he crops, but it is a food plot. It's not harvested. That's strictly a food plot. Next slide, please. He has an active nest box program. This is a bluebird box. Next. This is a wood duck box, a small pond that he's got directly below the house. Next, please. Goose nesting tub, they all get used. Sometimes he gets a double crop out of the wood duck box if some of the wood duck boxes are a little more on dry ground, so he'll double crop screech owls with wood ducks. But you notice the brush pile in the pond. He also takes care of the fish as well. Little limited in his ability to manage for those because the Missouri River is the biggest body water, and that's a little hard to play with the fish in that. Next, please. Bat nest or a bat roosting box. Next, please. And if you want to get a feel for what this ground looked like prior to Dave getting a hold of it, just look at the ground right in the background. That's exactly what it looked like prior to 1993. And I think it does it justice. That's Dave on the tractor the day he went out there to take the pictures. He was fighting Johnson grass. Everything that you've seen here up to now has not come without a little work, a lot of work. Next slide, please. This is the degree of planting that he's put into it. The shrubs that he started planting in 2009. Just completed that project in 2011. I think it's a little over 2,000 shrubs and how many, Dave? 20 some odd shrub plots? 72. I was a little shy. Next slide, please. He does this kind of detail for a reason. Not only does it benefit him in knowing what does work and doesn't work in terms of his management, but it gives him an opportunity to share the details with others. He has a stake at each one of the food plots showing what's been planted, when it was planted, the type of weed control that was used, and things like that. Next. Down in the bottom ground, he's also planted a food plot for deer. It's fruit trees. But again, it's taken care of. Somebody had to haul all that mulch down there and put up the cages so that they could grow big enough to mature and develop some fruit. Next. The neat thing about Dave, it could be said there's some self-serving motivation behind it, and there is. I mean, none of us does stuff like this or owns property just to totally share with others, but Dave is quite generous. Everything that he does, he has shared with other people, even to the extent that there's been more than one young person that shot their first deer, first quail, first turkey off of his property. So it's something that when Dave does any of the work that he does, it's with that in mind as well. Next slide, please. And with that, we're finished because Dave has to get on to spraying the next Johnson grass patch. So Dave's very deserving of the award, and I think he deserves a big hand for the work that he's done.
Dave, if you could come forward, and Mr. Secretary, if you do the honor of presenting the award and the print.
All right. Also, Commissioner Ann McGee is also here. Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Secretary. Secretary's remarks, agency and state fiscal status, Robin Jennison.
Mr. Chairman, probably the next meeting, be able to have a little more specifics on kind of the situation with the agency as far as the budget's going to kind of bring people up to date. We're right now beginning to work on the budget for FY 2014. That'll be the budget the legislature will deal with in January. So as you can see, we're going to be working on a budget that's not going to really, that will be into effect almost 2 years away from right now. And it does create some challenges, but that's just state government. That's what we're working on. We have had some preliminary meetings. We'll have a meeting in August to kind of wrap that up, and then we'll get it prepared for the governor to look at it then before the legislature comes back to town. We'll just briefly say that since I was not at the last meeting, we did have a very good legislative session this year. We had a big agenda. For the most part, we got the agenda passed. We did have to do some compromising on some issues to get our agenda forward. What we did pass this year will have some ramifications fiscally for the department, but none of that is going to come into impact or will impact the department. It won't begin till January of 2013, and the impact that we're going to see is going to be well later than that. So in the projections that we're making as far as revenue, whether it's for the park side or the wildlife side, we're not including any of the legislation that passed this year, but probably in the next fiscal year that we work on, 2015, it's hoped that we will be able to do that. And of course, to remind folks that the impactful things for the parks is the park pass that people will be able to start getting at the treasurer's office in January. As you remember, when we did that, Michigan was the only state that had done it. They got 28% of the cars and light trucks to participate in that. Our calculations were that if we could just get 10% of the cars and light trucks, it would be somewhere between 1.8 and $2 million more for the parks as far as revenue. So as you can see, if we'd get 20%, which still isn't to the level of Michigan, it'd be very significant for the parks. We did pass through the budget provision to pay off Wildscape for the cabins that we currently have in place at the parks, and if we're able to do that, we will then get 90% of the revenue for those parks, and that will mean about $1.8 million. No, that's a wrong number. 845,000 for the parks and additional revenue there. And also we got that to be a no limit fund with no restrictions on it, so we can utilize that money for cabins or we can use it for park ops. So if we have a reasonable year with the parks, I think it's certainly going to be much better than it was. We have the summer to get through. We have had the best January, February, March, April, and now May that the parks have had for what I have numbers for. And I'd like to say it's because of our management, but it's because of weather. I do believe that that you could make a case for the increased visibility that the parks has is part of it. But the fact of the matter is this past winter has just shown what an impact good weather can have on the revenues. This year is going to end out to be a decent year, even with as bad as last summer was. And if it appears that the revenues are hanging in there, we thought maybe that we were getting some revenues early on that would be people that were buying park passes and things of that nature that would happen then later on in the year, but that still is kind of hanging on. And Linda, are you going to talk about the online reservations? Okay. And with that, I'll kind of end, and I think the rest of the things going on in parks, Linda will take up. And of course, the fee side for the wildlife, as everyone knows, we did get the licenses passed for 65 and over, which that was a compromise. It's a half-price license for people 65 to 74, or if they choose to, which will be something you all will set. But we have committed to the legislature a senior pass at $40 level. And what that does, and one of the reasons we did that is because of the Pittman Robinson Dingle Johnson money, the seniors who are buying that patronize this place here and buy fishing equipment or guns and ammo are paying a federal excise tax that does not come back to Kansas because we can't show them as a hunter. And when you have other states, we are one of only 14 states that do not charge 65 and over in some shape, manner, or form. Some of them go to 70, some go to 75, some have a senior pass. When we're one of only 14 states not charging those seniors, there's a disproportionate share of the taxes that are collected here in Kansas going to those other states. So regardless of how the Fed deals with that, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we will be on a much more level playing field with the rest of the states. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I'm wondering about the park pass that one would get at the treasurer's office. What are we going to do to educate the public that that's a possibility? Because I don't think the people at the treasurer's office are going to help us promote that so well. So I think the public's really going to need to be educated that that's a possibility.
I think we might be surprised in how much they do help us promote
Okay.
that. They have expressed a willingness for point of purchase material when I visited with them early. I think Linda might be able to address, you want to address that now or later on? Linda can probably address some things we're doing with tourism and parks.
We recognize, thank you, Commissioner, for your question. We recognize that it is extremely important for the public to understand that the access is available to them. Obviously, as many people know, the Division of Motor Vehicles has had a little bit of a challenge lately. And so with that in mind, we did a lot of pre-work before they transitioned into their new system. We did a lot of pre-work with the Division of Motor Vehicles. We gained their support. Actually, they have a little bit of an incentive because technically they have the opportunity to reap 50 cents for each of those that they sell. So, and that's an option that they can take. They don't have to, but they are welcome to. And so we wanted it to be a win-win partnership. Hand in hand with that, we're working very closely. The tourism marketing team is working very closely with the state park crew to develop mechanisms that will really incentivize folks to do that. So hopefully you'll see a nice, healthy campaign on the counter and throughout all of our efforts in the state within the last couple of months of this fiscal year, this calendar year.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I don't have a question, I've got a comment on the cabin. I remember back several years ago when we started putting cabins in, talking about it, and it was kind of, some question of this be successful or not. But it's been a great thing for us and for the public and our customers. But I know a lot of times going to Colorado, where we've got daughter and son-in-law out there and a granddaughter, we will stop at Scott Park and camp overnight and coming back too. And before we had the cabins, we camped there one night, and there was a 1/4 inch of ice on the outside the tent when we got up the next morning. Next time we put in a cabin, it was a little nicer, but I still enjoy the tent. But yeah, I'm glad those are successful.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Mr. Secretary, the senior hunting license, that combination deal, that
Yes.
goes into effect January 1.
January 1, 2013. And at some point, Chris may have to help us. Technically, what the legislation is it authorized the department to have a senior lifetime hunting pass that was 1/8 the value, that was up to 1/8 the value of our lifetime hunting pass. So the commission will have to set that. What we told the legislature, our federal aid guys calculated up based on current U.S. Fish and Wildlife rules. We can set that at $40. Because it's a combination pass, we'll be making $1 per license per year. And so that is the minimum we can set it. Right now, Oklahoma's at 20. They're probably going to have to raise theirs. The feds are looking at that. But in the short term, we're going to be okay. And like I say, even if the feds do adjust the rules, the tables will be level now because we're in the game right along with everybody else.
And we're gonna have to set this before January 1.
Right.
And $40, Robin.
Is the minimum? Did I hear that?
That's the minimum we think that we could do it. What you have to, the way the feds were interpreting that, you had to make $1 per license. And we can put that in an interest-bearing account. You do have to actually calculate that you are taking some for the issuance of the license. So just rough numbers, we're saying we take $5 to issue the license. We've got $35 with a modest interest account. And this, for someone that's 65, because their life expectancy is 78, we get that many years of Pittman Robinson, Dingle Johnson money, so we have to show that we're actually making money, that dollar for that many years as well.
With no arbitrage involved, you can't, right?
Well, I'm not going to say that for sure because it's my understanding, we can take that money and invest it. And you can make significant interest on it. In fact, that's what Oklahoma did. Oklahoma actually had an investment account. Kansas before, which is similar to how we did it, before, years ago, the rule was you had to make enough interest to say that you were making money on the license. You could not amortize what you were getting for the license. The feds have since changed and let you amortize the actual amount that's paid to you over that period of years. And so they've changed the rules. They're looking at it again, to be honest with you. It could get changed again.
Are we going to know before we are asked to set this? No.
No.
We're going to guess?
There's just no way to know, and they may not change. The fact of the matter is what's happened, there is a state that's got audited. There was an audit finding. The state has not since said, they've not got the opportunity to respond to the audit, so nothing may happen.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Secretary? Questions from the audience? Chris, you want to tell us about the 2012 legislature?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is the second year of the two-year cycle, and it was a contentious one. As Robin pointed out, we did have quite a bit of success in the legislature this year, but there were seven major initiatives that were put out there by the governor's office in amongst all the things that departments wanted to do, and then everything else everybody wanted to do. Medicaid reform, Capers reform passed, tax code overhaul passed, water reform passed, school finance was out there, budget, judicial reform, and redistricting. And redistricting just went through the court system. The budget was passed. Usually there are three budget bills. There's usually a supplemental, which is the current year. There's a mega bill and an omnibus bill. In the last several years, there was an agreement on the supplemental or the mega bill, and it all came down to omnibus. This year was the same. We did end up with an $800,000 supplemental to help us through this year in the park system. Last year, we took a significant hit with blue-green algae and flooding and a number of items that really hit us hard. In the mega bill, there was the $1.7 million to pay off the cabins. That did survive in the omnibus bill as well. But in your briefing packet and in the handouts outside, the department had 6 initiatives this year, essentially, in amongst those other items that we tried to fit in amongst the other items that everybody else was trying to do. And we got 5 out of our 6 that we started out with, so I consider that pretty successful. Last year, in that in the 2-year cycle, the first year, the governor did issue the Executive Reorganization Order number 36, which renamed the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. That passed I'll just briefly go over those 4 items last year. An ERO, if no House objects, it becomes law after 60 days after the governor introduces it. That's what happened last year. House Bill 2013, there was a bill. It was a bill related to the sale of firearms. If you lived in Kansas, you couldn't go to Texas and buy a long gun because of some laws that were passed in 1968 at the federal level and 1970 on the state level. In '86, there was a reform bill on the federal level. Kansas never kept up with that, that's when instant background checks went into effect, which negated the need to restrict people from purchasing a long gun in a contiguous state. So that passed last year. Senate Bill 123 is something that we've done here at the commission level by allowing the department to change the cabin fees. That passed last year, and it used to be that those were in regulation. We've repealed that regulation. Now the commission can set those at a differential level at each commission meeting to keep up with market conditions if necessary. That did also include an amendment on land acquisition and took us down to 320 acres without prior legislative approval, or 640 acres if it was under appraised value. And then Senate Bill 152. 152 in 2011 allowed a person with a concealed carry permit to carry concealed during a restricted equipment season like an archery season. It also had provisions in there relating to allowing the use of suppressors, and then that passed and was signed by the governor last year. This year, Senate Bill 314, and that's what Robin talked about, and ultimately it became an omnibus bill, meaning that there were a lot of different parts. It started out as 65 and older for hunting and fishing licenses, requiring 65 and older to have hunting and fishing licenses. As that moved through the process, there was an amendment in the Senate. The Senate took that to half price, 65 to 74, age 65 to 74, or a one-time lifetime license at a certain fee level, which you guys will set. We'll talk about that again. Then it went over to the House, and it went over kind of late, and they took the provisions of another House bill, 2295, which has deer implications. They did a modification of that, and that made it onto that bill. 2295 also included an amendment as that original bill moved through the House related to law enforcement, and we can talk about that a little later on. Ultimately, when one side or the other passes a bill and it differs from what the other side, the Senate or the House does, it goes to a conference committee. They hash out the difference in a conference committee report. Both sides of the legislature have to pass that again, and they send it back then to the governor for signature. So really the bill passes 4 times, twice in the Senate and twice in the House when you have differing bills. They also, in the conference committee report, added in, they took out the law enforcement part at the department's request. It would have required us to check mandatorily 25% of all hunt your own land permits or landowner tenant permits. That's a big chunk of time. It was about 12.5% of our law enforcement division time. It's pretty significant, not that we don't think that that's an issue, and we are checking those, just not at that level. It included the provisions of House Bill 2709, which Tim Donges, who's here in the crowd today, helped get that bill introduced, and it increases penalties on violators, and there'll be some regulatory work in relation to that as we talk here in a little bit. The provisions of the bill did include a pre-rut antlerless season starting in 2013, and combination antlerless permits starting in 2013, and crossbows starting this year for a 2-year pilot in 4 units, which again we will talk about because it requires some regulatory work. The wildlife violator provisions become effective January 1 of 2013, as well as the senior provisions, the other stuff I gave you when it becomes effective. Senate Bill 316, every time there's an executive reorganization order, there has to be a corresponding follow-up, cleanup statute bill. And so that was Senate Bill 316, which is also one of our initiatives. And that passed through the Senate rather easily and then passed through the House rather easily. And it's effective July 1 of 2012. As a result of that, we're going to have to do a little regulatory work too, because we picked up some programs from Commerce, from the Department of Commerce. House Bill 2491 was not a department initiative, and it deals with carrying handguns in a restricted equipment season, like archery. If you recall, in January, we came to the commission in relation to this item. The proponents weren't satisfied with our answer, introduced a bill, and before they introduced it, we tried to whittle it down to handguns only, but it's basically allowing anybody to carry a handgun in a restricted equipment season, and that passed the House and Senate rather handily, signed by the governor effective July 1. House Bill 2596 is not a department bill, but it's something that we watch. You know, I track about 120 to 150 bills every session. This is one of them, and it deals with hunting of feral swine, and it changes the definition of feral swine and includes Russian boars and razorbacks, and also prohibits feral swine hunting on a contained hunting preserve, and that passed the House. It started out, and I tried to track that bill, and it, you know, because it wasn't ours, it's a little difficult, but it probably jumped 4 different bill numbers until it got to the end and then was passed and signed by the governor. House Bill 2689 was the third rendition of alcohol on KDWP property. That was a department initiative. It started out as Senate Bill 313, which was our bill, requested introduction, and it would allow the department to basically control alcohol on our property, subject to regulation. Current law restricts alcohol, or restricts it restricts alcohol to 3.2% beer is what you can have on our property. We thought a more modern approach would be to allow what we decide we want to allow and then restrict it by regulation. And that did pass late in the session, was signed by the governor May 25th, but it got lumped into a bill with a lot of other alcohol bills. I think there were 11 or 12 that ultimately passed. There was a lot of concern in the legislature about opening up sales of alcohol in grocery stores, and that prevented individual bills from going through the House. They all got lumped in together, and there was a compromise bill, and that's how it ended up passing. House Bill 2729, also a department initiative, established the annual park permit, annual vehicle permit, and set a price so we could come back and set it in regulation later. And the alcohol provisions go into effect January 1. The same with House Bill 2729 goes into effect January 1, but it's the park pass that we talked about already, sets the fee at $15. House Concurrent Resolution 5017, that was also a department initiative. It had passed the House last year. It was in the Senate. It is a constitutional amendment. It has to pass both houses of the legislature, is sent to the voters in November. If the voters pass it, it would allow the legislature to come back and set a different level of property tax, a different level of taxation for boats. I think it's pretty important. A lot of people think that it could increase the sales of boats. It would modernize the fleet in Kansas, and it would also prevent people from unlawfully going out of state to register their boat to avoid high Kansas property taxes. So that'll be up in the November 2012 general election. There was a House concurrent resolution which dealt with recognizing the 75th anniversary of the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program, which is federal aid. That's where we get our federal funding, which also we talked about in relation to senior licenses and permits. There were a number of bills that didn't pass. 120 was a Vessel Titling Act. I'll just briefly give you the headers on each of these. Would have required titles for vessels. 348, which would have taxed people who were avoiding tax by keeping their boat out of state, even though it was registered here. Senate Bill 380 was crossbows. And the crossbow issue that I didn't mention before, I think, is it's down to 4 units, and we set it by regulation, 2-year pilot. But 380 was full-on inclusion of crossbows. 447 was a department initiative, and we actually didn't get that passed. That was the one thing we didn't get passed this last year that we had tried. When it passed the Senate, didn't pass the House. There was a corresponding House bill that we tried to get passed, and it went down in flames on the House floor. But essentially, as you know, we set fees according to caps. If there's a cap in statute, we set the fees by regulation here at the commission level. And what we proposed was raising the cap to $60 on a vessel registration over a 3-year period. And currently, it's $30, and it's been $30 since 2006. And it took us, according to my research, from 1991 to hit $30 in 2006. It was actually a little before that recodification of the agency. So the legislature didn't seem too keen on that bill this year, at least in the House. The Senate didn't have a problem with it. House Bill 2089 allow hunting dog owners to retrieve their land that's posted without permission. 2152, increased penalties for boating under the influence. That died in the House. 2168 would have given free park permits to enter any honorably discharged resident of Kansas. We opposed that bill and it didn't go anywhere. 2295, which was a mega deer bill and it had a number of parts, and ultimately a substitute came out as the pre-rut antlerless and the combination permits, which is what we saw come back in Senate Bill 314, those items. 2432, which would have allowed a Ducks Unlimited license plate, and we followed that. Obviously, that could have impacted our constituents if they wanted to get it. The bill got lumped in with a number of other license plate initiatives, and then didn't make it out of the Senate. Well, it passed out of the Senate, but it didn't make it out of the conference committee, which is strange. Usually if a bill goes to conference, you expect it to come out of there in some version, but it didn't move. House Bill 2452 would have given 12 big game permits to the governor. We talked about issues associated with that earlier this session. That the department did oppose that, and the bill had no further action. 2551 was the fee on the vessel registration, the original House one that went down. 2709 was the anti-poaching bill. It came in late in the year, and then we had a substitute bill. Once we ironed out the details, it passed the House really rather handily, got over to the Senate way too late for them to take action. But once a bill has passed one House or the other, it's conferenceable. And so we convinced the conference committee to add it into our 314, Senate Bill 314, which got it out of the legislature this year. And then House Bill 2735, it would have held rail bank operators responsible for taxes. That had a contentious hearing in the House and really didn't move anywhere. And with that, I'd be happy. That's a lot of stuff, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Chris?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On the crossbow issue for 2012 season, is that going to be what we passed?
It's a pilot project in 4 units, and there's going to be an amendment tonight on KAR 115-25-9A. And so the department has 4 proposed units, and it'll be in effect this year for a 2-year period.
And it starts in 2013?
Starts in 2012.
2012.
And runs to January 2014, and then we report to the legislature on what we find.
Okay.
Chris, the one that the commission passed, it goes into effect on in 2012 as well?
Correct.
And that is the one, that's the one with under 16, over 55.
It's youth permits, so it could be a 16-year-old who bought a youth permit at 15, but
The one we passed goes into effect.
In
The one that
2012.
in 2012. The one that the legislature passed goes into effect 2012 too. The difference is they have unlimited, there were no exemptions.
no age exemption. Correct.
And there's only 4 deer management units that they're being used as a pilot project.
But for 2012, that'll be statewide, over 55 and under 16?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Are these bills going to get consolidated? What we passed and what they passed, are they going to get consolidated into one? Or are they going to stay separate?
No,
It's a study.
as they pass, are you talking about the?
Crossbow.
Okay, the crossbow issue, right, they're concurrent, right? So what we're proposing tonight is anybody in those units gets to use a crossbow, which is what the pilot project's supposed to be. And so there's just overlap between the 2 regs. You'll pass a reg that the legislature mandated we pass, and then the reg that you guys passed in March, right?
And what we're looking at tonight, the department's recommendation on this crossbow, this is the first time we've seen it, is that right?
That's correct.
And we're going to vote on it tonight?
That's correct. The timeliness of the legislature and the uniqueness of the situation is why we ended up with that.
Very eloquently put.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I had one question. Chris, you said that the department received an $800,000 supplemental. Help me with the vagaries of this. Is that just state tax money that comes from the governor's desire to help or how does that?
Okay, so when the department budgets Robin alluded to, we're talking about now 2014 budgets. The legislature passed 2013 budget. We also look at 2012. So, I mean, we're doing all those calculations. And last summer, we took a big hit in the parks. And so we asked in that process for a supplemental, which would be in addition to the current year. And the governor puts that in a budget request to the legislature. And so that it was originally 1.2 million is what we asked for. And the Senate made an amendment to that on their version. And then the House compromised and agreed to that amount. So we end up with an $800,000. And in this case, this year, it's a state general fund. Starting July 1, our budget shifts to EDIF, Economic Development Initiative funds. So we're out of the state general fund business, which is a good thing for the agency, in my opinion.
So is there restrictions on how that money can be spent? Does it have to go to a certain area? Be spent in a certain area?
Well, the legislature passes a budget that you have to work within. You can.
No, when we receive the 800, you receive the 800,000. Is there certain limitations on what you can and cannot do with the money?
I don't know that they pass it for an intended purpose, and if you don't use it for that purpose, I think you're going to end up in violation of the law. But it's for parks.
It has to be parks.
Right.
But it was actually for park ops and salaries.
Okay.
And actually, we've already spent it. We robbed from our, or not rob, I should say. We journal vouchered road money over, and then, so we'll have to put that back.
Okay.
And that 800,000 is already spent.
It's already done.
It's already back because we'd use road money to get through the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Chris. On HB 2709, what was the point of the color change from purple to orange?
Well, there was some discussion, and it wasn't Tim's idea. It had come from a couple legislators. Essentially, because they wanted to increase the penalties on trespassing, and it didn't really shake out that way, they wanted to change the color. And there had been some people who had hunted in different states. I mean, I surveyed the states as best I could on quick notice. And, 4 or 5 use blaze orange. There's about 5 that use purple. 1 uses silver. You can use lime green, to post your property. Some states don't have any posting. It's just a sign. They don't allow the color. So there's a wide variance across the board. And the people who thought that that was a good idea thought that blaze orange might be more visible. And there was discussion back and forth as to, might you think that that's actually a hunter because you see orange out in the field versus the purple. People would have to change the color. They were unhappy about that. It's amazing what a little color discrepancy can cause. So ultimately it ended up, and, I think the proponents hadn't discussed it with Farm Bureau or KLA very well or in advance. And I think that prevented it from changing. A lot of that membership didn't want to change their colors, which I can fully understand too. You're out painting your posts, and now you're going to have to go repaint them a different color. And then they agreed on a phase-in period, but ultimately that didn't make it into it made it out of the House, but it didn't make it into the conferenceable portion of the bill that I put in. I thought it would drag it down. So that's why we didn't end up with that in there.
Good, thank you.
So we're still with purple for now?
Yep.
Okay.
And I think maybe some people probably won't propose that again. I'm just guessing based on what I saw.
Any other questions for Chris? We'll hear from you in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Tourism briefing, Linda?
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. A couple of things. One, Commissioner Bolton, I also wanted to mention to you with respect to our State Park Pass, one of the things that we also worked out with the Division of Motor Vehicles is for those who don't want to go wait in line at the office, that State Park Pass will be available online when you renew your car tags as well. So that was a big win for us, I think, with respect to that, because there are a lot of people who do renew their license plates online. A couple of things before I get into the tourism initiative, but it goes hand in hand with what we do with tourism, because tourism is such a strong partner with our efforts in the state park. As Robin mentioned, our revenues are strong this year, which is a really good thing for our state parks. And there's a couple of things that we've implemented from a technology perspective that I think has really added to this, starting with, I guess I should say, very early in the year, we recognized the fact that we needed to sell as many annual permits as we possibly could. And tourism put together an e-blast, and in fact, a series of e-blasts that encourage those who have had a tendency over the last 5 years in some cycle to purchase an annual permit. So those people were notified and asked to consider purchasing early to get their discount, and we did see an increase in those annual park passes. So we've been utilizing the e-blast to help enhance our visitation. The other thing that we've implemented, which I think is a real positive thing for our customer base, is we have partnered with Reserve America, which is an online nationwide reservation management system that will enable people. It's provided a lot of recognition to the state parks from the perspective of the customer base. In the past, our reservations were also available online. They were only available online through our own website, though, our own agency's website. This is a nationwide online reservation management system. So when somebody keys in, they want to do camping in Kansas, that online reservation management system is the very first thing that pops up and gives them the opportunity to actually log in, register, and reserve campsites and cabins at our state parks. So that's been a real positive benefit to our state parks. The other thing that we've implemented, if you haven't done it yet, for those that are out in the audience as well, is implemented a smartphone application for our state parks. And if you go on to Pocket Ranger and do a search for Pocket Ranger, Kansas State Parks on your iPhone, regretfully, we don't have it on the Android version yet, but we do hope to have that soon as well. You can go on, you can reserve a cabin, you can reserve a campsite, you can find out what type of fish you just caught. You can find out what the regulations are for that fish that you caught and whether or not you can keep it. You can find out where our trails are, where you can use ATVs, where you can do horseback riding, whatever it is that you want to do. I'd like you to know in the first week that application was available, it was ranked 34th in the number of downloads in the nation with respect to smartphone applications. So I think that's a real big positive plus for our park management team. So do take a look at that and please consider downloading it. The other thing with respect to our state parks is obviously it's our management team that continue to work very diligently to make our state parks a positive place to visit. They have done a phenomenal job. Our visitation is up this year, not only due to the weather, but I truly believe that it's due to the management teams that we have in place at each of those parks as well. Moving on to tourism, one of the things that I think we have a PowerPoint, and commissioners, you're sure welcome to move. You don't have to move. I think you could probably, it's just a few pictures. There's been some key developments over this past couple of weeks with respect to promoting and opportunities for Kansans and visitors in the state of Kansas. One of the things that the governor indicated early on in his campaign is that he really wanted to provide additional access to folks into the Flint Hills of Kansas. On June 9th, the governor conducted a ribbon cutting ceremony for a project that our own Commissioner Frank Myers has been working on for how many years now, Frank?
10 years.
For 10 years. He conducted a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Flint Hills Nature Trail. It will be one of the longest rails to trails that exist in the United States. When finished, it'll be 117 miles long. Currently, up to this point, there are 65 miles of finished trail that is available for hiking and biking and horseback riding sunup to sundown 365 days a year through the Flint Hills. And we have a couple of pictures right here on the PowerPoint if you want to move through those for me that shows, and and just shows Governor Brownback cutting with the ribbon cutting ceremony. I think you'll see Commissioner Meyer in here. And Commissioner, if you'd like to make any comments with respect to this event, you're sure welcome to.
Well, we are the 7th largest in the nation. We are the longest done totally with volunteer labor and donated money. In the 10 years since we started, we're just $40,000 shy of having raised $1 million. And we've got untold number of volunteers working, and people are getting it done. And some people wonder why it's taken us so long. If you wonder, you're welcome to come help. And thank you for that. So, yeah.
We did, and on behalf of the governor, he does appreciate all the work that you put into that trail, so thank you. The other thing that recently we've accomplished, for those that don't know, not only does the governor like to ride bicycles, he also likes to ride those that are motorized. And this past Saturday conducted the governor's first annual Foothills Freedom Ride, which was coordinated by our team as well. So not only do we do the nature-based tourism initiatives, but we also do those on 2 wheels. And there's just a couple of pictures here. We had over 400 bikers that participated in the event. It started on the south steps of the Capitol and traveled along the Native Stone Scenic Byway and completed its ride in the city of Wamego. The ride was a benefit ride. It benefited 3 different areas, one being the Native Stone Scenic Byway. Secondly, the Hearts Apart program, which is a program at Fort Riley that works with the families of those soldiers who have been deployed out of the nation. And then thirdly is the Brothers in Blue reentry program, which is for those who are incarcerated and returning them into the community to help make them good neighbors. So the benefit ride raised approximately $50,000. So that was a big success for the agency as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Smalley. Richard, unless there's any questions, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner.
No questions, Linda, but just simply a comment, because I get the little email blasts from your department and then also from Wildlife and Parks. So you might mention that to those in the audience and the other commissioners. If you haven't signed up to receive those email blasts, you really should, because it gives us a lot of up-to-date information very quickly.
Absolutely. And actually, one last thing. We, at the agency, again, this year, our website that the commissioner is referring to is ksoutdoors.com. You can log on there, or travelks.com. Sign up for our newsletters and our e-blasts. We'd be happy to consider any of the interest levels that you have. But one other thing that's really exciting about what's going on within our agency, we are once again a proud partner with Cabela's. We want to thank Cabela's for the opportunity. For those who are not currently registered for Fishing for Millions, you really can win $1 million if you go out there and catch the fish in one of our state parks. We have 7 state parks that are participating with Cabela's in Fishing for Millions. If you are not registered, if you're going out fishing, feel free to log on to our website, ksoutdoors.com. It will provide you the Kansas state reservoirs that are participating in that program, or you can go on to cabela's.com/fishingformillion or fishformillions.com. So if you have any question, I know that Jimmy Lopez is here. He'd be happy to, or you can sign up, get your information downstairs, or log on and get out to our state parks and do a little fishing. So with that, Richard Smalley, our marketing manager for tourism.
Thank you, Linda. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, within your book, there's a sheet in here, just kind of a highlight sheet of things that we've been up to this year, kind of a status update of where we are at the end of May. Our television campaign, we are in 15 markets, including Lincoln, Omaha, Kansas City, Springfield, Jeff City, Columbia, Joplin, St. Louis, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Colorado Springs, Denver, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and Davenport. And I would like to say this time, because of our budget, the only way we're able to do television is with the help of 8 partners, community partners, that each contribute $20,000 to help us purchase television advertising. And those are Kansas City, Lawrence, Topeka, Manhattan, Salina, Hutchinson, Wichita, and Dodge City. And once again, without their help, we wouldn't be able to purchase television. Online component, much heavier this year, and we're in the process of planning our calendar year 13 campaign, and we're even going to go heavier on online components and less print as the print market is it's a lot harder to gauge return on results. Online is where everybody is these days, and it's easy to track what we're doing, and it's much more flexible and adjustable as we go on. Also, we are, and actually Becky Blake said she's watching this online, and a Cabela's commercial popped up while we were watching it. So we're working on a new website, which we hope to launch in October at our tourism conference in Dodge City. It'll be a much more mobile-friendly site. I mentioned print. We were in 17 publications, including this fall we'll be in Field and Stream and Pheasants Forever. Our print also included a newspaper insert that was in 15 markets, pretty much the same markets our television ran in to coincide with that. We have a new travel guide coming out the first of the year. Kansas Magazine we produce, we're happy to say, is self-sustaining. In our fiscal year, ad sales have produced $111,000 so far. So we've been able to expand the content, so it's a greater value for readers. This summer, we are doing some marketing training at 4 different locations around the state to help with some of the rural communities and destinations to understand what our department's up to better, to also help them with their marketing plans. We've got this, it's our second year for this Faces and Places promotion, which we're basically out just about every weekend at different festivals, traveling across the state, just to help promote Kansas tourism and to help Kansans get a little more acquainted with what's available in Kansas. And I'm happy to say that on June 30th, I will be at the Paxico Meatloaf Festival, and I get to be a judge. Now it doesn't get any better than that, does it? So, research, we are in the first stage of our ad effectiveness and return on investment research study. We haven't done this in a couple of years. It comes in 2 phases. One is ad effectiveness, which just measures what people think of our ads, did they see them? And then later in the year, we measure the effectiveness of those ads. Did it create any incremental travel to the state? A couple of other things underway. We're working closely with KDOT on some byways initiatives. We are in the middle of a 2-year contract with a company called Gizmo Pictures out of Topeka to shoot video and grab stills of all the byways across the state in every season. And we'll have 11 videos come out of that, plus a whole library of photography assets as well. And we are also in the middle of a byways interpretive plan that is Ted Eubanks is coming into the state, visiting all the byways, working with the byways to help them interpret and better promote the individual byways. So that's kind of a quick recap of where we are. And with that, I mentioned our 8 partners, and one of our great partners is Bridget Jobe. She's the Executive Director of the Kansas City Convention and Visitors Bureau and also serves on the Governor's Tourism Council. I guess I should ask if there's any questions first.
I have goodies. First of all, welcome to Kansas City, Kansas. We are so pleased that you are here and you chose to have your meeting in our hometown. Linda had asked me to give a very quick tourism update of Kansas City, Kansas, and some things that are going on. Some of you know the great success story that we have had in Kansas City, Kansas relating to tourism over the last 10, 12 years since the opening of Kansas Speedway. We have become a major tourism destination, not only in the state of Kansas, but in the Kansas City metro and in the Midwest. We welcome over 10 million visitors a year to our community. Thank you for being some of those. I've marked you off on my list as adding them up. I know that your interest is outdoors, and at first glance, a lot of people don't think of Kansas City, Kansas as being an outdoor destination. Our bread and butter is the leisure traveler. It's mom, dad, and the kids coming for a 3-4 day weekend, looking for shopping, going to the water parks, staying here. But we know, and actually Secretary Jennison said this very well a few weeks ago at an event we had, we see ourselves as a gateway to Kansas. We know that when the visitors are coming to Kansas to hunt, to fish, to do other outdoor activities, their first impression of Kansas very likely could be Kansas City, Kansas. And actually many of their first stops are going to be right here. They may be stopping at Cabela's, at one of our hotels, or looking for an activity for the kids. So we take that role very seriously about being that gateway into Kansas, and we feel that we are part of that outdoor experience for those visitors. I have in here, Don's in charge of passing out our visitor guides, which, by the way, these are, were voted the #1 visitor guides in the state of Kansas, which we're very proud of. Our visitor guides that tell you a little bit of the activities that you can do while you're here, and I hope that you'll take some time to explore our community. A word that we use a lot is tourism game changers. And if you look over the past 10 years of Kansas City, Kansas, we've had many game changers. We've had the Speedway, Village West, which includes Cabela's, Nebraska Furniture Mart, the Legends, Great Wolf Lodge, Chateau Avalon, T-Bones. All of those have been game changers to our community. Some of the newest ones that we have had have been Live Strong Sporting Park. That has brought some national and international attention to our community we couldn't pay for any other way. It has been amazing for us. Of course, the opening of Hollywood Casino, again, is a game changer. It's bringing a whole new group of visitors to our community. One of the things that the opening of both the casino and the Speedway and Live Strong has brought to our community is some the ability to have some extra events like concerts. We were able to host Can Roxas last year. We had Farm Aid here. These type of things that are bringing visitors to our community that would maybe otherwise not come and visit. This year we didn't have Can Roxas. It was held at Kansas Speedway, and the reason is because of the new repaving project that they are doing. You can actually go online to kansasspeedway.com and watch the work being done as they are actually elevating, so it'll be a higher banking so that there will be better racing, is the way I understand that. They're also putting in a road course, which will, again, bring some of those new visitors that have not been here before. One of the things Richard mentioned was the partnering that he does with us, and I wanted to express to you the value we see in that partnership. We partner with the State Tourism Office in TV, radio, print, online, social media, with travel writers, with the international market. Basically, any way that we can, we partner with the State Tourism Office. We do this because it helps us stretch our dollars to go a little bit further. We couldn't do TV on our own. And so by partnering with the state, we can do that. One of the unique things about Kansas City, Kansas is that we are a border community to another state, to Missouri. And one of the things we have learned is that visitors, they don't see a state line. They don't see a county line. They are coming to the Kansas City area for the Kansas City experience. And we know that what happens on the Missouri side in Kansas City, Missouri highly affects us. When things like the All-Star Game, the Big 12 tournament, the American Royal, that affects our hotels. It affects our tourism industry, especially those downtown hotels that we have. So this year, for the first time, we've been able to partner with the Kansas City, Missouri CVB in creating Kansas City market television commercials. And I will tell you, this was a challenge. One of the challenges is that they receive monies from the state of Missouri to be able to put those on. And sometimes states don't like to work together very well. And so it was a challenge on how we were able to do that. It took us about 2 years to be able to figure that out, but we do now have Kansas City Metro commercials that we are partnering with. A couple of new upcoming things that I wanted to just put on your radar range, things that I'm excited about. The first one is our Wyandotte County Fairgrounds, and I'm going to pass around. I do have some copies of what our new fairgrounds is going to look like. We have a new location. This is our second year in the new location, and it's right at the corner of K7 and Pulfer Road, if anyone's familiar with that. And this is something that's very near and dear to our heart. In fact, last year I was able to take my granddaughter to the Wyandotte County Fair, and I realized it was a fifth generation from my family who participated in the fair. And that was very fun to be able to do that. But part of what they're putting in the fairgrounds is there is going to be a shooting range. And there's some more of those that we can pass around. And right now what they have approved, and this is not built yet, but what is approved, that they're going to have 5 trap, skeet, and 5 stand fields. There's going to be a 50 to 100-yard rifle and pistol range. There's going to be indoor facilities that are going to have air rifle and BB guns. And this is all in the process right now of their raising funds for this. Their goal is that they will be able to host state 4-H competitions, have both experienced and novice events, school district shooting programs, and hunter safety classes. So again, they are in the process right now of raising funds, but we see this again as a game changer for our community, and it's something I wanted to make sure you are aware of. The other thing we're very excited about is the Kansas River. I see the Kansas River as a really untapped resource for us for tourism. We have 3 access points in Wyandotte County, Edwardsville. There's a brand new one under the Turner Diagonal, and at Caw Point, which is the confluence of the Kansas and the Missouri River. We do host several events on the river right now. Probably the largest is the Missouri 340 River Race. They take off from Caw Point and they paddle to St. Louis, which is 340 miles. And this is a huge event for us. We get quite a few overnight stays and a lot of national attention from this. We have things like the Blues Fest that's happening this fall at Caw Point. So we really want to see our river developed. I know there's a national designation that is being talked about, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that that is something we see as very important to us. So with that, again, thank you for being there. I'd be glad to answer any questions. I did want to point out Jimmy Lopez with Cabela's is my board chair. And I just really want to make a point that Jimmy gets the idea, and Cabela's does, of tourism and the role that they play not only in our community but in the state with their partnerships. So I wanted to point that out to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? All right, thank you. Okay, spring turkey regulations, Jim Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mr. Secretary. I do have a few recommendations that we're going to bring forward for some discussion, but before I do that, I wanted to give you a little bit of an update, at least what I've got available so far on this past spring turkey season. As far as permit sales are concerned, we sold 63,928 total permits this past spring. Of those, 22,052 were game tags. Those numbers are fairly similar to what we've sold over the last few years, although we are now down about 2,500 permits from where we peaked out in 2010. I'm currently in the process of surveying our constituents right now to come up with some harvest estimates. I don't have those figures yet, but some preliminary results indicate that hunter success across the state's again going to be in the ballpark of 60% or a little above even, which puts us up among some of the best success rates in the country again. Anecdotally, it appears that folks in the southeastern part of the state had a little bit better season this past year. Due to some better production over the past couple of years, we've been down severely in southeastern Kansas since about 2004, so that was encouraging. Other parts of the state seem to be doing fairly well, stable or increasing hunt success preliminarily, maybe down slightly a little bit in the north central and the northeastern part of the state due to some wet springs the last couple years and poor production. But overall, we seem to be looking fairly well at this point. As far as recommendations are concerned, we are going to be recommending new spring hunt units that correspond to the fall units that the commission passed, I believe, at the last meeting. And if you recall, we are changing the hunt units to facilitate the implementation of our harvest management guidelines, which we've talked a lot about over the last 6 months or so. Basically, what the change allows for is to match up our management units with our hunt units, which allows us to use spring hunt success and age composition of the harvest to help us guide what recommendations we bring forward to the commission. And you can see in the briefing book materials the new hunt units that we are recommending, and again, they have already passed for fall. Some other things that we're thinking about bringing forward at the next meeting that we're just throwing out there for some general discussion today include increasing the bag limit from 1 to 2 in northwest Kansas, and this would be where we would start at when we implement that harvest management strategy. So that's something we're thinking about. Another thing that we're thinking about bringing forward at the next meeting would be allowing Unit 4 permits, the southwestern part of the state, to be used in adjacent hunt units, but still keeping the quota at 500. And finally, we're thinking about making some changes to the archery-only season and the youth-disabled season. In the past few years, we've seen the number of archery hunters during that archery-only season greatly increase, which is a good thing, but we're running into some issues with some of our department-sponsored youth hunts that occur on the weekend prior to the start of the regular firearm season. And because of the great increase in archery hunters, those folks are running into a little bit of competition when they're trying to take the kids out. So we're recommending that we close down that archery-only season during that weekend prior to the regular firearm season. In fact, we're planning to recommend that the archery-only season be delayed, the start of the archery-only season be delayed until after that first full weekend, so those kids and disabled folks can have at least one full weekend to themselves without competition. And we're really looking for some guidance from the commission on specifically how to move that recommendation forward, or even if to take that forward. So with that, I'd be glad to hear your opinions and take some questions.
Tell us what you're looking the commission to do.
Looking for some guidance from you on how to move that the changes to the archery only and the youth disabled season forward. Right now they overlap completely, starting on April 1 through the second Wednesday in April, which is when the regular firearm season starts. We're running into some issues with our youth hunts because we've seen a great increase in the number of archery hunters over the last few years. Most of those youth hunts are on public areas, and the folks that are taking out kids are finding difficulty finding a spot to hunt without competition on that weekend. So we're looking to reduce that overlap somehow.
To completely split it, 2 different seasons.
Possibly. Right now, we're thinking about just delaying the start of that archery-only season until after the first full weekend, which would give the youth and disabled folks the opportunity to hunt by themselves from April 1 through that Sunday prior to the regular firearm season.
And it's April 1, no matter what day of the week April 1 falls on.
That's what it is right now.
Okay, so April 1, and right now we have basically 2 weeks of youth and archery before traditional firearms, more or less.
Well, it depends on the year. The regular firearm season opens the second Wednesday in April each year. Some years we end up with as many as 11 days, I believe, of archery youth disabled season. Some years it's as short as a week or less.
Generally allow the archery hunter to have a weekend before firearms and the youth hunter to have the week before that? Or would some years the archery hunter not have a full weekend without firearm hunters?
If you delay the start of that archery season until the Monday following that first full weekend, I believe it was, let's see, over the next 10 years, that would result in 4 9-day archery-only seasons and 6 years with only 2 days in that archery-only season. So there, 6 out of 10 years, there would be a severe reduction in the number of days for the archery-only season.
Have we asked the youth and the disabled in some sort of a survey, anything, what they want?
We haven't asked those folks, but we've talked a lot to the people who are guiding those folks during our department-sponsored hunts. And we've also talked about this in great detail at our departmental turkey committee, which includes folks who work for the department from all across the state, as well as the NWTF. And this is what we settled upon.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask one group, do you want to have exclusive use of that weekend or do you want to share it? I think we know what the answer is going to be. No matter which one you ask, it's going to be a self-serving approach.
That's what we're for. Right? Make that decision.
Who's on the turkey committee?
We have representatives from public lands, private lands, from all 5 regions of the state, so there's 10 folks right there. We have 2 law enforcement representatives. We have the regional biologist from the National Wild Turkey Federation, and myself.
And you're the head turkey, right?
I'm the chair. Right. I guess you can call me the head turkey. I'm not going to gobble for you, though.
And who do you report to?
I report to the Chief of Wildlife, Mike Mitchner.
Okay.
How often does this turkey committee get together?
We typically meet twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, to talk about potential regulation changes and habitat projects and such.
What are we going to do?
I have a question. What would be the consequence of giving the disabled and youth a week to themselves? Is there a negative consequence? Is that why we're hesitating?
Not as far as we're concerned. Getting more hunter recruitment of youth is a big initiative of the department, of course. The negative would be to some of the archery hunters because they're going to be losing out on days.
My opinion is this. I appreciate what you guys have done as a committee. I appreciate what everybody inside the department has done. I'd like to know what the users are going to want. And I understand the chairman's comment on being self-serving, but that's probably most of America, so that's the way it's going to be. I'd like to know, is there an easy way to do this?
Not really. It's very tough, and we had quite a bit of discussion to settle upon what I would put forth in the briefing book. What makes it difficult is that our walk-in hunting areas don't open until April 1. So if we push the season any earlier than April 1, it excludes all that walk-in hunting area from our youth, and it's way too difficult to try to redo all those contracts to fix that problem.
In the spirit of trying to promote youth hunting and without competition, and I tend to think that staff recommendation makes the most sense, although, you know, we'd all wish we had more and more information because it might not care. But I think you've got some representative feedback from the guides who take the youth out that enough to where you believe it's not just an anecdotal situation, that there's a lot of people who feel like they're struggling to find non-competitive environments where they can take a youth out.
That's generally the consensus I'm hearing from all of our department-sponsored hunts, the folks that guide youth during those events. And it's certainly real because our data indicate that the number of archery hunters has nearly doubled since we started that archery-only season in 06 or 07, I believe. Yes, sir.
As I look at next year, I'd flip the calendar forward. So if it opens on April 1st, that's a Monday. So if you want to get it through the first full weekend and then open back to archery, you're basically 2 days, 3 days, 2
Six-
days before this.
6 out of the next 10 years, the archery only season would only be 10 days. 4 out of the next 10, it would be 9 days. Just depends on the year.
Any discussion, any thoughts on, I mean, because I've archery hunted for years, and turkey as well, but back when this was originally done, supposedly to have more of a sporting chance, so to speak, for archery hunters, or to give them additional before the shotgun season opened. Now with the numbers, has there been any more discussion? Is that still really necessary, or?
Well, it depends on who you ask, of course,
I
whether it's
know.
necessary or not, but what it does, it provides some additional opportunity for folks. Hopefully it encourages people to take up archery who wouldn't otherwise.
Which the number shows it has.
It has, and that has worked, and it also spreads out the harvest a little bit, so hopefully it reduces some of the competition on opening day of firearms season. So I think it is working to address each of those objectives that we set forth initially.
Jim, the conflict that you have here is that there's competition for the youth disabled hunter and then the archery, the able-bodied hunter, right? And there's competitions for the lands that they're on?
Yeah, we have several department-sponsored hunts across the state, most of which occur on public lands, on and around public lands, and that's where the biggest issue seems to be arising, although they have seen increased competition on the private land too, where they're guiding youth.
Can you quantify it in any way? Is it other than anecdotal?
The only way I can quantify it is the number of archery hunters that we have during that season, which has, like I said, nearly doubled. But as far as, hunter interference rates or something like that, I don't have the ability to
Like
quantify it.
if we have 2 or 3 complaints, statistically, that isn't anything. If you got 20 or 30, it probably is.
Right. This is something that's been coming up in our departmental turkey committee for probably the last 3 years or so. And at first we thought that it probably was just a few incidents, and it's the screams from the field, I guess, have gotten louder over the last couple of years. So I can't quantify it, but I think it's increasing and it is a real problem.
Well, my only objective on this one, I guess, is to encourage youth hunting, and we do that however we can, because that's the next generation. Not to discard the disability side of it, but I think if you feel like your recommendation does that, I'm assuming?
Yes.
To encourage youth hunting?
Yes.
Then it's,
Yes.
then it's okay.
We think the recommendation gives those youth a more quality experience.
Is there anyone on the commission who takes objection with that concept?
Have we heard all the public comment?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
We haven't heard any public comment yet.
Not yet.
Is there any comment from the public? Yes, please come up and state your name.
My name's Steve Letcher, and I just had a question. Do you have the numbers on the archers versus the number of youth hunting? You said the
number
archers
of
have
youth?
doubled. What is that number? If it went from 200 to 400, that's a big difference than going from 10,000 to 20,000.
Right. I'm going to be shooting from the hip here a little bit because I don't have them in front of me. But I believe that number of archery hunters is somewhere around 7,000 over the last few years. Number of youth hunters is 4,000 or so. When we started the archery season a few years ago, I think it was 06 or 07, I don't remember exactly which year, but that first year we had roughly 3,000 archery hunters.
Okay, and my only comment is possibly did you consider just closing the archery season for the first weekend? Go ahead and let it open on April 1st. Saturday and Sundays reserved for youth-only hunting, and then start it right back up so you'd still have, instead of a 2-day season, you may have a 7-day season to a 9-day season rather than go from a 9-day to a 2-day.
We talked about that, and that was certainly ranked high among the different options we were considering. And finally, we decided to settle upon just delaying the start for simplicity. But what you're recommending would be an improvement that I think most of our field staff would support.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I get this straight. So you would have the regular season, stop it for 2 days on the weekend and start it up again. Would that be kind of a nightmare to law enforcement?
That's why we didn't recommend
Okay.
it. But if we could do that, I think our field staff would be very supportive, as would I. And that would be something maybe Chris could answer better than me or Kevin.
Any other public comment?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, good to be back. Jared McJunkin, I'm Conservation Field Supervisor for the National Wild Turkey Federation, covering Kansas. And we've been kind of involved, as Jim mentioned, we do have a position on the Wild Turkey Committee. And there was a lot of discussion with this. A lot of our volunteers do take part in these departmental youth hunts. And I've heard firsthand some of these encounters and having some issues, not myself personally. But I just wanted to bring from the board that the state board of the National Wild Turkey Federation here in Kansas, that they are very supportive of what the department is trying to do to encourage and give those youth and those handicapped that weekend to themselves. And we realize that there may be some compromise in there and figuring out the best way. And as the previous gentleman mentioned, we discussed that, and it got kind of changed around. But I guess just so you know that the board is very supportive of what the department is trying to do.
Any other public comment?
Dave Weber from Wathena. I guess now that you gave me the Habitat Award, I'd have nothing to lose, so I can speak my mind. Which, by the way, that was very, very nice. Thank you. I've got a whole list of things I love about Kansas and a whole list of things that we do right in Kansas. Thank you very much to the department and to the commission. And one of the things that we've really done right in the last few years has been the archery early turkey season. I mean, I didn't know how much fun it could be and how great it could be. And 2 trips to the field, I and my hunting buddy went out. We bought new blinds. I bought a new bow. I bought more arrows because you can lose a lot of them turkey hunting. It's been an awful lot of fun. But Mr. Pittman, if I understand correctly, the major hunter interference competition problem is happening on public lands.
That's the bulk of it, although there have been some issues on private land with leasing also.
Okay.
Archery hunters are leasing up that property earlier and
Okay.
precluding it from the youth hunters.
And one of the things I had in my notes was possibly a March 25th opener. But I understand your point also about the walk-in hunting contracts. Just the thought I had while I was listening to this conversation was, it's possibly a compromise to have just those public land areas closed to archery only during a certain time period. I mean, the main point I want to make is, hey guys, you gave us a great thing with that 2 weeks out there in the field with a stick and a string. Please don't mess it up. Because as Mr. Pittman said, it's getting better and better, and the numbers reflect if he's gone from a few thousand and double those kind of numbers, we're talking about them. And it's going to get better and better as people get out there and find out what it's like. So that's one thing I would kind of wonder if the committee maybe entertained the thought of just closing down certain areas. In my county, in Donovan County, we have maybe a couple of walk-in hunting contracts, not hardly any public land area. So you can kind of give some thought about maybe don't penalize all of us private land guys by shutting it down completely if there's nobody else out there that we're interfering with. So that's just a thought maybe I'd like for you to entertain and think about a little bit. If it would be possible from a law enforcement standpoint, how much of a nightmare it would be just to take certain blocks of time during those 2 weeks or so and just close down certain public land areas to us adult archers and just have that open out there reserved for youth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Jimmy Lopez, and this is my personal comment, but you and I both know there's no difference between Cabela's statement and myself. So I just definitely want to let the commission recognize the weather that we had this last year. I think the best hunting was happening with the archers and the youth with the warm season. You saw the turkeys already in full strut. I was jealous of all of them getting out there so early. So I would definitely take in consideration that the first is always kind of concrete for archers, and it's well known. I think, what he stated, maybe going into March, moving into March just for the youth and the disabled would definitely be a strong consideration. That's all.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Jim, as you move forward into March, or move back into March, you get closer to the equinox. If it were a more normal temperature year, would that not be a little more of a disappointment perhaps to start trying to move it up?
We definitely didn't want to move the youth season any earlier for that reason. Increases the likelihood of poor weather, but it also excludes them from all that weehaw too. So for those two reasons, we really didn't want to push the youth into March.
Okay, this is going to be up for public hearing next 2 meetings from now?
October, November, whatever, October.
Okay. I mean, the one, I really think we want to focus on what works best for the youth hunting. If there's I'm assuming that most of the youth hunting, it takes place on the weekend. The turkey group might consider an amendment to maybe have that first weekend when applicable. And I appreciate the archery hunters, although the archery hunters who hunt private land without competition do have that opportunity to be able to go out the first weekend. They don't have to cease hunting with a bow when firearm season comes up. But we might consider a possible amendment. Other than that, I tend to think that most of the commission wants to defer to the perceived best interest of youth hunters and the hunter recruitment concept. That's kind of what I'm getting from everybody here on the commission. And if there's a way that it could be done to where we don't penalize them, but you can still hunt with your bow in the first weekend or gone into regular season, and if you have a lot of private land, you're not going to be having that competition.
Well, we'll take all the comments into account that we heard today and come back with a more formal recommendation
And
next time.
I'd like for
We're
you
just
to
throwing
do
it
that.
out there for discussion at this point.
Well, that's the guidance. My opinion is if the proposal here tends to be the best as far as the turkey group is concerned, then I think we leave it. If there's a way we could tinker around to just freeze off that one first weekend without making it a couple of paragraphs long that people are confused.
Right.
Then, see if that wouldn't work. Because I suspect that at that point in time, most of your youth hunters are still most of these are still weekends. But
That's correct.
I don't know, anybody else concur with that thought? Is there any more public comment? I just started talking and I didn't see anybody. If you're slow getting up here, sometimes I talk over you, so. Does that give you enough guidance?
I think so. We'll explore the possibility then of shutting it down just for that weekend with Kevin and Chris, see if that's feasible. If not, then we'll probably move forward with what I proposed today. Does that sound okay?
That would be my recommendation and
Okay.
direction.
That's what I wanted to hear, so thank you.
All right. Let's see here. Before we start on animal damage control, I would like to say we take a 10-minute break, and I'm going to be tapping loudly on this in 10 minutes, so let's try to all be back and go from there.
Here's no explain where the darn was. sooner or later, you know. Now, see, what I'm gonna do, I'm 73. And in 3 years, I'll be 76. I want to run for president like this guy down in Texas did, see. And I can't be on this and run for president. I wouldn't stoop that low. No, that's all right. They want to listen to me, they can listen to each other one. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I didn't see that. I didn't see that. We should have stopped there. I live right off the. Oh, I told him he's up there. Well, this on a Sunday morning. Oh, I see. Okay, I would have been home. Yeah, I said, well. It's not real bad. You can see it, you know, they go to the store and see green water. You get a real windy day, it kind of chases it away. And east where the lake, it's almost like a grassland. It's kind of a barrier there. It doesn't seem to be coming from the south, it's all farmland. And so it kind of comes and goes. Yeah, really, it's fun. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, good fishing.
All right, let's roll. Let's call the meeting back to order. Yo, would everybody please take their seats? Frank, you take all the time you want. This is his last day. He can say anything he wants. All right. Animal control briefing. Mike?
Here I am.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this afternoon we were asked to do a reasonably short presentation, and we plan to keep it that way, on our programs on nuisance wildlife control. One of the things that I did, I asked Charlie Lee, who is a Kansas State University Extension wildlife specialist, who is also a major partner in the program the department does, to come and give a brief on some of the things that